I know most of you are like, where is this on? Where has he gone? He hasn't shown his face in a very long time.
Bruh.
Well, lo and behold, here I am, the toughest dog in the sucker. Grab a piece of paper and let's go. Hello and welcome to Hospital Survival Guide. My name is Dr. Moses Kazevu. This is a series on my YouTube channel where we'll look at hospital-related topics, ward-related topics, and pretty much how to survive in the hospital. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button on our road to 10,000 subscribers. Do not forget to share the link to the channel to a friend, and it may help them. So this is Hospital Survival Guide Season 2, Episode 2. And today we're going to be looking at pretty much how I survived my pediatrics rotation. I know, like, geez, kids, they're fun when they're okay, but when they get sick, it's like really, really heartbreaking. So, first of all, I would like to first give you a background of how pediatrics was for me back when I was still a student back in medical school. So during pediatrics rotation, we would rotate in two main departments. So we'd rotate in general pediatrics, would also rotate in NICU. So you would find out that most of the times, at 5th year, I would miss most of my NICU rotations. At 7th year, I also missed a lot of my NICU rotations. So it means that getting into internship, I was really worried about the NICU rotation because I had missed most of it and I hadn't actually had a solid idea. I attended a few of them and most of them would just have them for like about 2 weeks before the rotation actually ended. And you know how it is in 7th year, you're just worried about, oh no, I have to go and study. You don't even want to be on the wards and you don't even want to spend or waste much time because you know that you're about to finish and you're about to graduate. So I had these concerns when I was going to the rotation for the very first time, and actually the week before I was switching departments because I came from internal medicine. I think I did a video on how I survived my internal medicine rotation, but I never really did one on how I survived my pediatric rotation. So I was coming from internal medicine and I'd actually really loved internal medicine, and it was a rotation where I was so comfortable because I had done a lot as a student back in school. I had done a lot of this work and I had done a lot of reading. So it means that when I was working there now as a junior resident medical officer, it made it a whole lot easier for me to actually put what I had learned from the theory into practice. And I really, really loved internal medicine. Maybe, who knows, I'm going to specialize there one day. The first cut is the deepest, you already know. And then now, going to the pediatrics department, and I know, I was like, what am I going to do? I have missed most of the rotation at 5th year. I missed most of the rotation at 7th year. Yes, it was for good reasons. I wasn't dodging, guys. I wasn't dodging, but it was for good reasons. So I had missed most of the rotation at 5th year and I'd missed most of the rotation at 7th year. So I thought to myself, how exactly am I going to make it in during my internship, because I'd missed most of this pediatric work. That's how I was like, who knows, let me just dive right in. So my biggest concern was being in the NICU because I'd missed most of the rotation during, as a student, the NICU rotation. So that was my biggest concern, being in the NICU. So I was praying, and this was my prayer when I was going legit. I was like, God, please, if you want the children to be saved, please take me to general pediatrics first, so that I can have some time to study on the NICU topics and actually acquaint myself with the NICU topics before I actually go to NICU. So fast forward, of course I took like a break when I came from internal medicine. And guys, break is very important. Otherwise, if you go to work and you haven't yet committed your mind and you haven't yet have that notion in your mind that now I'm doing this rotation and I'm fully committed, you'll find out that you're having these lame excuses and not really coming to work. So for me, I always tell myself I'll rest first. Even if I'm taking like a week or 2 weeks or a month at most, I'll rest. So that when I actually go to my next rotation, I'm going to be 100% committed to actually do it. So I had rested for a bit. I'm not going to say how much I rested for, because if I do, then you'll be like, if he's doing it, why can't we do it as well? Then the hospital will end up not having anyone at all. So what happened is that I actually rested from coming from internal medicine. Then I switched departments to go to pediatrics. So I don't know how I'm always unlucky in all the departments where I am. I'm always unlucky. I always reach on the call days. So I reached the pediatrics department, and luckily the head of department actually knows me because he was my lecturer at medical school. So he knew me. I was like, oh, Dr. Kazevo, you're welcome to the department. So you have to contact such and such a doctor to put you on a call day. Then what really happened now, when I was assigned a call day, I was assigned to a Monday call. And keep this in mind, if you have a Monday call, oh my goodness, I am sorry for you. Like, I'm sending you hugs. I would have sent you money, but there's no money. So I'm sending you hugs. You know why? Because most people in the country actually have this notion that people don't work over the weekend at the hospital. So they're going to keep the child that's sick at home. Let's say the child falls sick on Saturday. They'll keep the child on Saturday because they have this notion that people don't work at the hospital on Saturday. They'll also keep the child at home on Sunday because they think people are going to church on Sunday. But I guess they've never heard of the story of the donkey that falls in a hole on the Sabbath. Are you going to leave the donkey, or are you going to help it? So most of our patients would come on a Monday. So it means that the hospital will be full. By the time you're coming 8 hours on call, the bench already has like 5 people that are waiting there to be attended to. And you're like, yo, where did you people come from? Why didn't you come over the weekend? It's like as if they were just waiting. They're like, no, he's going to be on call on Monday. Okay, let's wait. And then we go on call on Monday. So it was a very hectic thing. But then I actually didn't know that Monday calls were actually horrible, because coming from internal medicine where I had a Wednesday call, and then previously surgery when I was doing the COVID issues, I talked about that on the channel as well. We had surprisingly a Wednesday call again. I think we had just had Wednesday calls. So this was my first Monday call, and I had this notion that okay, fine, it's going to be okay. I was wrong. So what happened is that then I got into the department, had my first call day, and it was quite overwhelming. We had patients coming in left, right, and center, and with a lot of things. But the goodness is that, remember that I had attended the general pediatrics rotation during my 5th year medical school and during my 7th year medical school. So I had an idea of how to manage patients, like on a basic, like a shallow level, without having yet to refresh on certain topics. So I had a basic idea of how to actually manage these patients. So first call day, we actually saw quite a number of patients. We're seeing like, I think, close to 30 patients, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember quite well. We'd see 30 patients, and by then we were on call with 2 other colleagues. So I joined them, and they were so excited to see someone new come to the team. Little did I know that they were excited because now the burden was going to be lessened, because they knew that the Monday call was actually quite hectic, but they kind of didn't tell me this. So Monday calls were very, very horrible. And pediatrics department is quite busy, especially on Mondays, and children actually get sick over the weekend. They don't come to the hospital, then they wait for a Monday because they assume that everyone is in the hospital on a Monday. So that was me joining the department. So the very first week, you know how the very first week is, you're disoriented and you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. You don't know where you're supposed to be. But luckily, I think I came in the middle of the week, but I was assigned to a Monday call. So I actually joined one of the registrars that was doing a round on that particular day. And this particular registrar, that day was quite funny. So I get there, I meet the consultant, he assigns me to the registrar that I'm going to be doing the round with. We start doing the round and we see a few patients. I think we started off in acute bay, if I'm not mistaken. We saw the patients in acute bay together, we wrote some notes, then we got to the next one, and I think he got like really, I don't know if he was on call, but he got really tired and like he just left, like the registrar just left. Then I had to finish off the round, and this was like my very first day. So that's how I managed to finish off the round, and I knocked off and then contacted the doctor that was responsible to assigning the call days, and that's how I was placed on a Monday call. So fast forward, first week was not so bad, and you're just getting used to the system and you're getting used to children. So there are certain things that actually I was really scared of in pediatrics, and I'm sure you have heard of stories. Number one, cannulation. And you know how it is, you get these parents that are very anxious because their child is sick, And moreover, they are feeding their child so much. So this child is a chubby baby, like chubby chunks. And you're trying to cannulate this child. And you already know that cannulation of a pediatrics child is actually quite difficult. So that was one of the biggest concerns that I actually had. And worse off now in the NICU, meaning that cannulating those small babies, and you're in the NICU and you're wondering, how am I going to cannulate this one? And the nurses would actually call you. The nurses would call you if they failed to cannulate. Some of them were actually didn't even attempt to cannulate, because I'll get there and then I realized that the child doesn't even be attempted. It's like as if they were really hesitant to initially start to cannulate, because again, if you're cannulating a child and you end up using all the veins, then it becomes very difficult for the next person to actually cannulate. So I kind of do understand why some of them were not attempting, because it's a bit of a challenge when you learn cannulation in pediatrics, or when you're cannulating in pediatrics for the very first time. So what happened was that with these cannulations, it's in the initial phase, I even developed a theory actually when I was in pediatrics. I had what we call lucky weeks. So there would be 1 week where you're putting cannulas in there, just going in, pow, pow, pow. First tries, you're not even playing. Those are the days where you even where you walk and feel like a consultant. Just say the mother calls you, because you would just enter into the ward, and that would be the biggest issue that the caregivers that are on the bedside would actually have. They'll call you and say, hey, doctor, please come and see my child. The child doesn't receive medication, the child doesn't have a cannula. And even if it's not your patient, it's not you're not the unit doctor that's seeing this patient, you can't just say, oh no, this patient is not ours, I'm not going to put a cannula on this, because it's a child. The child knows nothing and the child is innocent. So you are obligated to actually put a cannula on this child. So you'd get called and we're like, doctor, please come, doc, come, and put a cannula here. So you'd get there, and if it's your lucky week, and I have this theory, if it's your lucky week, you go in, all your cannulas will go in first try. So you go in, you put in, you even remove your gloves like a consultant and just walk away, and like, this is what they were failing to cannulate. These people are not serious. You even put those to the comments, or those people are not serious. But if it's not your lucky week, you go in first try, 0. Second try, 0. Third try, 0. We even reach the point of even shaving the side of the head, try and cannulate in the scalp, because that's where you can actually cannulate from the scalp. You try, 0. You try this other side, 0. I remember there was one small child that was a malnutrition child that really gave me a big hassle in cannulating, and I actually spent almost 1 hour trying to cannulate this baby, because everyone else had failed, and I knew that if I fail, I'm the last person who's seeing this patient. It means this patient is probably not going to be cannulated, and it means I have to now start involving anesthesia, and you know how it is to get people from theater. That's a story for another day. So that's how I eventually struggled and I cannulated. But as the rotation actually went on and on, actually the cannulation skill actually improved greatly. And actually, when you leave pediatrics, you will have no challenges cannulating. Right now, I even tell my students, I'm like, for me, gold standard for cannulating adults is 2 times. The first time, if I try, okay, maybe I'm tired, or I'm hypoglycemic, or I'm hungry. The second time, if I try and I miss, it means I have to give someone else to actually attempt. I never attempt to cannulate an adult more than twice. Whether they are obese, whether they are skinny, whether their veins are dancing around, I only try 2 times. That's the gold standard, because after you rotate from pediatrics, you have a very good understanding of how you can actually cannulate individuals, and the technique, you get to learn it best in pediatrics. Worse off in NICU. That was PTSD. So in NICU, when they call you that, although there's a child that's born and this child is hypoglycemic, maybe let's say the RBS is 2 millimoles, and you know that you have to cannulate this child. There's no other way that you're going to be given the dextrose, because rectal dextrose is generally not advised. Let's say if you are trying to put it in the umbilical vessels, they are already clamped. So that now creates a challenge for you. So now you start to have to tying the hand of the child, you try the foot, and if the foot, you can't manage, you even end up shaving the head, this side and the other side, to see where you can actually cannulate. So we actually had a child that we ended up giving a mohawk. That day, I remember the day like it was yesterday. So generally my cannulation skills were not so bad. Not to brag or anything, I'm not really bragging, but my cannulation skills were not really so bad. So I was called by a colleague that can assist me to actually cannulate this baby. So I was like, oh, okay, let me give it a try, because I think that was my lucky week of putting in cannula. So I get there and I realize that this child has been pricked several times on all the venous points of access. This child has been pricked. I try the first time, I fail. Second time, I fail. Third time, I fail. Fourth time, I fail. I'm like, no. Then I now use a different method of mine, and like I have a secret technique of cannulation. I'm not going to talk about it right now, but if you want me to talk about it, please comment in the section below if you're really enjoying this content. So I try my technique, and lo and behold, it actually goes in, and I'm able to cannulate this child. Fast forward, we have another scenario, such a case of NICU, where we all try to cannulate the child. Even the registrar tries, until some random person, I don't know who even cannulated the child, managed to cannulate the child, but it took a very long time. We even ended up shaving the child this side, giving the child a mohawk, but still we were not able to cannulate this child. So it's a very, very big challenge to cannulate children in pediatrics. That was the first thing, and my overall experience, especially in the pediatrics department. The second thing was actually dealing with patients, dealing with their parents, actually. Not dealing with the children themselves, but dealing with their parents, because the children are not so bad to deal with. You actually, if you really love working with children, it's very easy actually to be in pediatrics. And the only part that's difficult is actually seeing these children that are sick. So actually, the parents that are impatient, the parents that were actually impatient, they're seeing that there are a lot of people on the queue, but they want to be attended to first. Like, yo, who died and made you king? Chill, relax, join the line. So we would often get those patients that are really, really impatient, on those caregivers that are impatient. So that's something that you have to be prepared to actually face in the pediatrics department. And that was the second thing that was there. But in the NICU, actually, the only problem is if the mothers are there and they're feeding and you're trying to cannulate a child and they have noticed that you have failed more than once, then it becomes a problem for you. And the mothers will even end up refusing and say, no, don't cannulate my child. But if the mothers are not there, then you can actually try to cannulate, and you struggle a bit, but eventually you cannulate, because you really need to. In pediatrics, every child must have a cannula. It's actually a crime to see a child without this child actually having a cannula. So the second thing is, of course, the impatience of the parents and impatience of the caregivers. Then the third thing that was there in my rotation is that there was now a time where we had to transition to the NICU. So we were in general pediatrics for, so if you're trained locally, you do the rotation for 3 months. If you're trained outside the country, you do the rotation for 6 months. So we spend half the time in NICU, half the time in general pediatrics. It doesn't matter where you start. So I started off with general pediatrics, and then I transitioned to NICU. So when I transitioned to NICU, luckily, actually, I started off in the stable ward. It's advisable you start in the stable ward. If you start in acute bay, you're prepared to be stressed. So I started off in the stable ward, where there's not so much activity that's happening, because the children are stable. The children that are macrosomic, the children that are coming from acute bay and have already been stabilized. Then the children that are managing for things like congenital Louis, which is congenital syphilis, would often keep them in that ward. So generally, this ward wasn't so bad, and I actually got the hang of NICU, especially in the first 2 weeks. I got the hang. Then we had to move now according to the wards. So we generally had 4 main wards. We had the acute bay, we had the stable ward, we had the HIE ward, and we had the KMC ward, where we're keeping the children with kangaroo mother care. So I started off with the stable ward, which was not so bad. Then afterwards, I went to the acute bay. So I stayed in the stable ward for, I think, 2 weeks or so. Then I went to the acute bay. Yo, that was the most stressful point of my life. Because in the acute, in one acute patient in the pediatrics NICU, is in acute bay in NICU, you can actually spend quite some time. Because when you're in the NICU, you have to calculate the fluids every day, you have to calculate the feeds every day, you have to check if the drugs are done, you have to check if the child has a cannula, if the child needs some bloods that have to be drawn, you have to draw those bloods, you have to follow up the results, because these patients are rather, some of them are quite unstable, so you have to be top notch when you're managing these children. So that was a very, very stressful point in my life, and I was really stressed. I was really asking myself, why did I choose medicine? You know that point when you actually get, but I'll come to the rotation that actually made me contemplate and ask why I actually chose medicine. It's not even NICU, something else. Stick around on the channel. If you haven't been subscribed at this point and you're still watching the video, what are you trying to attempt? Like what, right? What? Please just subscribe to the video. It's going to save you your time. So once now I was in the acute bay and it was actually very stressful. We stayed there for like a week, then we moved out to the next ward. So that whole week felt like as if I was there for 3 weeks. That's how stressful it is on the acute bay. Then afterwards, I moved on to the HIE ward. The HIE ward was rather also quite chilled, and it was a monotonous thing. So it was kind of like the stable ward. So I actually didn't have much problems there. Now moving to KMC. KMC was also a word that I did not like. Why? Number one, it was constantly hot because it's very hot in there. They always have heaters. And you know how breast milk actually has this characteristic musty like smell? So it always was smelling quite weird because of the breast milk that the mothers are expressing. So I never liked to be in that ward. Luckily, I was only there for like, I think 1 week and some days. That's when I was in KMC, and then I think the rotation was done, the pediatrics rotation. So that was the NICU experience. Generally, with NICU, you have to be calculating the feeds and the fluids every single day. You have to be checking if the medications are being given, ensure that all the NGTs are in situ and they're functional. You should know how to put NGTs in NICU patients and even in pediatrics patients. And also the other thing that we're doing in the NICU is we daily weigh the children at regular intervals. So we would often actually do this, especially for the patients that are very critical patients and the patients that are in KMC. So that's how it was in the NICU. And then again, there were some drugs that you couldn't use in NICU that you could use in general department. Then there was a way in which they were giving the antibiotics, which was, I don't know, it was just a very, very new experience, quite different from general pediatrics. And generally, actually, in overall, NICU wasn't so bad as I thought it would be, because I didn't really attend the NICU rotation as much as a student in 5th year and as a student in 7th year. Then, so that was my NICU experience, and that was the third thing. The NICU experience was pretty much, it was standard. It was okay. Then the fourth thing about my pediatrics rotation was the fatigue. Like I told you, we had a Monday. So for me, it was actually a big disaster because in our pediatrics ward, we don't really have units per se because there are not so many consultants and there are not so many doctors to have separate units that are running on their own. So we would have units, yes, but we were all considered just as one, like pediatrics doctors. So what would happen is that I was on a Monday call. Okay, so it means when you're on a call on a Monday, you enter the hospital at 8 hours on Monday and you clock out at 8 hours the next day. That's given if you've actually done your post-admission round and you've seen the patient that you have actually admitted. So the unfortunate thing is that the doctors that I was grouped with had a major ward round on a Tuesday. So you'd find out that at 14 hours, I'm just there like dozing on the round. I'm just like this. And the consultant was like, "Are you okay? Young man, please go home. You will faint for us here." And often I was just tired all the time. And you want to learn from the major ward round because that's where most of the learning is actually happening. But you find out that I'm so fatigued on the major ward round that I'm not really learning much, and then I actually eventually get home. So you find out that every time post-call, I'm leaving and I'm getting home roughly at around 16 hours. And by the time it's 16 hours, you want to rest and sleep. The next day, you are expected to be there in the morning at your workplace. So that's something that actually made it very, very difficult to actually deal with, especially in the general pediatrics. And I was constantly tired during the rotation. But I found a way to actually not really stress myself, to rest whenever I can. During the cold days, we'd often take some breaks and give each other some breaks, lunch break, and then maybe some breaks in between later on, and you share the shift so that it makes the work lighter and it makes our work much more efficient, and so that you're able now to see the patients and you're not really dozing and you're not really making mistakes. So that was the fourth thing in terms of the fatigue. Then the fifth and final thing about how I survived my pediatrics rotation, and this is what almost even took my life. This would have taken on. You guys, you would have not even seen me here. So, kids carry around these nasty flus. Like, I respect children's flus, because I got this very nasty flu that I had and it took me out for like almost 2 weeks of the rotation. And bear in mind that this actually even delayed me leaving the rotation, because the consultant was like, no, you weren't here for those 2 weeks, so I'm adding 2 weeks to your rotation. So I couldn't argue, because I genuinely wasn't there and I was sick. So that's one thing, the illness. If you can survive that, please make sure that you go with a mask each and every single time, and just minimal contact. Avoid touching surfaces, touching your mucosal membranes. Wash your hands at all times. And of course, it's just general. Even when you're dealing with children, even in the NICU, make sure you're washing your hands before you actually move from one patient to another to prevent these nosocomial infections. It's a very big thing, especially in pediatrics. So I got sick and actually carried this, and I think even on the channel there was a point where I was actually sick, and I actually told you guys I'm still sick up to this point, and it was one thing that I actually carried with. But luckily now the cough has gone, I've completely healed, I'm in a new rotation, greener pastures. Not really greener pastures, but you know what I mean. So that's how I survived my rotation, my pediatrics rotation. If you did enjoy this video, consider subscribing to the channel. Hit the bell notification icon so you never miss such amazing content every time I post. To Zambia and beyond, my name is Dr. Moses Kazevu. Until next time, bye bye.